The first 2 years of a baby's life are a period of learning and adjustment for both the parents and the child. Caring for a new baby, parents may see symptoms and conditions that raise their concern, and they will take the baby to a doctor. Frequently, these visits will involve behavioral problems. Pediatrician Dr. Wendy Roberts.
Most times they come to the physician for some other reason. It's an illness or a worry about an injury or worry about a rash or worry about some other problem. The behavior problem is often underlying it, and that's sort of the reason to come and a comfortable reason to come. But then once they're there really is some concern about the baby's behavior or personality that they want to talk about.
With very young babies, a common complaint is colic. They appear to be having abdominal pain. They draw their legs up and produce a lot of gas. The discomfort can be so severe they will cry for hours. It usually occurs in the late afternoon or evening. The causes of colic are not well understood, but it appears to arise from cramping in the muscular walls of the intestine. Because the causes are not definitely known, the main treatment is to try and relieve the discomfort.
Close contact seems to settle and work some of the time. There is definite comfort that comes from being talked to, being sung to, the rhythm and the extra stimulation of voice and music can be helpful.
Medications can occasionally be prescribed, but these can have side effects. Parents can try non-prescription products that sometimes provide relief. The theory that colic may be caused by a food allergy leads some to change formula, substituting a soya-based preparation for a milk-based one. However, if a mother is breastfeeding, she should continue. It's a cold comfort, but colic is a condition that most children outgrow somewhere between 4 and 6 months of age. However, it is something that parents should watch closely.
During the first few weeks, if something changes in terms of the baby's pattern, if vomiting should develop, if the baby is crying for a much longer period than usual, if there's a change in stool patterns, those may suggest some underlying medical problem, and those are the features that should lead to parents going back to the physician for a further check.
Very good, sweetie. Really?
Often, behavioral questions arise about sleeping. Some children won't settle down and go to sleep. Others will wake up shortly after they are put down and not go back to sleep.
I think one of the first things is to have a very consistent routine around bedtime. It seems that children have to have certain stages that they go through to sort of lead into sleep. Some of the elements of the routine are very much tied into certain stages that they go through in development, where really one of the first things is that they don't want to have to leave mother for the night. And so that as you get into more of separation anxiety, where the child is more aware of being alone as they get to 7 or 8 or 9 months, they don't really want to be by themselves. And so one of the first approaches to helping sort out a sleep problem is to try to aim to get the child used to going to sleep alone. And the things that can help with that is the 2 or 3 little drinks. Often there's a real routine around having a drink, the bath time, the story time, having a familiar object in the bed or in the crib with the baby, because that becomes a replacement object really for a mother. So they waken up and they see the same familiar objects there, they're more likely to go back to sleep. So there's the routine of saying goodnight and actually being left on their own, which will lead most children then to settling down and going to sleep.
To help the baby feel secure, the room should be dimly lit with no harsh shadows, so he can see his surroundings and not be frightened. If the baby makes a fuss once he has been put down, parents should reassure him every 10 minutes or so by placing a hand on his body, but they should avoid picking him up.
Now, some very determined babies who are really absolutely insistent that they're not going to accept this structure will, for the first few nights, keep up fussing and crying, sometimes for 2 or 3 hours. But if you can live through that for 3 or 4 days, they very quickly adapt and get the message. And often, in fact, a 2 or 3 hour fuss one night will only be an hour the next night, and the baby will be settled in 5 or 10 minutes the following night. It's amazing how quickly it works if you're consistent.
As babies get older, questions sometimes arise about eating. Children that won't eat regularly or are finicky eaters. These changes in eating habits may be part of the natural growth process of the child.
Often after about a year, there's a real plateau in terms of rate of growth, and children's appetites really slow down quite significantly at that time, and then will pick up again a few months later. And during that period where they're not really gaining a lot in height, and their weight doesn't need to increase a great deal, and they do not need as much food. And that often leads into a period where food becomes a wonderful arena to have some interaction and establish some independence. So that meals, unfortunately, often become battlegrounds.
Part of the resistance at mealtime stems from a child's natural preference for certain tastes and textures. They will struggle to get what they want.
I think that the way to avoid a battleground around that is to say, well, that's the food. You take what you would like from that food, but if you don't eat very much of that food, there will be no other food offered until the next meal. And that's a choice that you're making, and that's absolutely fine with me as a parent.
A parent can also use some psychology in presentation. Make the meals more interesting by putting a variety of small portions on the plate and arranging them attractively. If the child doesn't eat, it's important not to break down and give snacks later. Even drinks of juice or milk will fill them up.
Yum, yum.
As babies grow, they become more responsive to their parents and other children. They also begin to venture out on their own, exploring their environment and testing limits. The terrible twos send many parents to the doctor complaining of disobedience.
Nearly all children, in learning about their environment, will keep testing limits and keep seeing how far they can take certain activities within their environment. And so it's absolutely normal to have to frequently guide a child of, say, 18 months as they're running into this activity and running over to that corner and trying to lift something, so that they need a lot of interaction and a lot of limit setting. And if you look at that as being in disobedience, you'll get into more of a negative interaction.
One way to reduce the negative elements of discipline is to provide an area like a kitchen cupboard where the child can exercise his curiosity without endangering himself. Yet, despite parents' best efforts, they will sometimes have to tell children no. Some children will have temper tantrums. Understanding the psychology of a tantrum can help parents deal with it.
If they get a lot of attention because of the tantrum, they'll keep it up. If very little attention is paid to it, you just make sure that they're not going to hurt themselves and you ignore them as much as possible, then the stage of tantrums will settle down much more readily. One of the most alarming or difficult experiences, I think, for a lot of parents is the child who in the middle of the temper tantrum holds their breath. And I think parents can get very, very frightened by this breath-holding phenomenon. Some kids will go blue and pass right out. It's not something that's all that unusual, and it's not something that really is all that alarming, because as soon as they pass out, their nervous system very quickly takes over and keeps the breathing process going just as it does during their sleep.
Experience teaches first-time parents that many of the behavioral problems of infancy can be dealt with by using psychology and lots of affection and attention.
I think the most exciting thing about parenting a child during the period up until 2 years is the very rapid development that takes place. It's a real miracle to see how the brain and the whole process of development is bringing about the creation of a very real individual little person, and that can bring a tremendous amount of pleasure and reward to parents.
What about me?
Okay.
亲爱的观众，今天的健康良方就要结束了，不知您看后有什么收获？如果你对本节目有何看法和要求，欢迎来信告诉我们。好，观众朋友，我们下次再见。